A Ferrari crashes in the darkness. A fashion heir falls from a bridge. A billion-dollar lawsuit pits a mother against her own children. Indeed, they call them the Kennedys of Italy, not just for their $3 billion fortune, but for their uncanny ability to transform triumph into tragedy with clockwork precision. It is a dark irony. The family that built its fortune selling vehicles to the world would be repeatedly destroyed by them, starting with a seaplane propeller that separated the founder's son from his head, to a car collision that killed the matriarch, to a suicide from a bridge that shook the nation. But make no mistake, this isn't just a story about grief. This is the dynasty that controls Ferrari, runs Juventus football club, and owns The Economist. Through the giant Stellantis, they control Jeep, Ram, Peugeot, and Maserati. They are an industrial power so vast that their departure would precipitate economic devastation for the entire country. For 125 years, the Agnellis have performed an unparalleled act of political jiu-jitsu, manipulating fascist dictators, collaborating with communist governments, and surviving 2 world wars. They possess a power that exceeds most governments. They decide if Italy's economy grows or crashes. So, how did a family cursed by death build a system too big to fail? And what is the price they paid for absolute power? Buckle in. This is the wild story of the real godfathers of Italy. They have manipulated fascist dictators, collaborated with communists, and survived 2 world wars. They have rendered themselves utterly indispensable to the Italian state. Their departure would precipitate economic devastation. The Agnellis are not mere corporate owners. They manage the very currents of industrial power throughout the continent. While most dynasties squander their fortune by the 3rd generation, the Agnellis have relentlessly compounded their power for 5. They successfully resisted fascist efforts at subjugation and thwarted communist attempts at nationalization. If the Rockefellers conquered oil and the Rothschilds commanded banking, the Agnellis have seized control of something far more elemental, the intricate machinery enabling modern civilization itself. Yet, this ascent was completely unforeseen. The Agnelli saga commenced in 1866 with Giovanni Agnelli, who emerged from a middle-class background in Villa Perosa, a quiet Piedmontese town where momentous events were unheard of. He possessed no manufacturing experience and inherited no vast fortune. Instead, he harbored something far more potent, a consuming obsession with dissecting the mechanics of industrial power. But Giovanni's ultimate separating insight was deeper than mere production efficiency. He recognized that mastery over transportation was superior to mastery over production itself. The raw figures illustrate this startling rise. In 1900, Fiat's 35 employees produced only 24 cars. By 1910, they led Italian auto manufacturing. By 1920, Giovanni had aggressively diversified into aviation, insurance, media, and financial services. By 1930, the resulting Agnelli empire governed approximately 8% of Italy's total industrial output. But their achievement was not just building an empire, it was engineering a resilient system designed to retain power regardless of seismic political shifts. When communist insurrection threatened, they negotiated shrewdly. When democratic pressures mandated reform, they adapted swiftly. Every political transition served to strengthen their position. They had perfected the delicate political calculus of making themselves utterly necessary to the regime in power, all while preserving private, absolute control over essential economic infrastructure. To fully grasp this unprecedented mastery over European industry, we must return to 1866, and the young cavalry officer named Giovanni Agnelli, poised to unlock the secret that would reshape the trajectory of industrial history. Giovanni Agnelli was 23 years old and bleeding from a 6-inch saber gash when he experienced the profound revelation that would ultimately establish a European industrial dynasty. The year was 1889. Giovanni was serving as an officer in the Royal Piedmontese Cavalry, deployed near the Austrian frontier amidst the waning tensions of the collapsing Habsburg Empire. Unlike his peers, who were preoccupied with military advancement and navigating Turin's traditional aristocratic society, Giovanni nursed an obsession deemed vulgar by his comrades: the burgeoning industrial machinery appearing in northern Italy's factories. During his official leaves, rather than attending balls or pursuing romantic conquests, Giovanni meticulously explored the small manufacturing sites and mechanical workshops proliferating around Turin. He devoted himself to studying steam engines, reverse engineering production methods, and relentlessly questioning factory owners about their costs, output efficiency, and market viability. His fellow officers dismissed him as an eccentric. His family found his interest in industry undignified for their social standing. Yet, Giovanni had perceived a fundamental shift invisible to them. He was witnessing the dawn of a new, formidable type of power that was destined to render the ancient aristocracy irrelevant. The injury occurred during a diplomatic training exchange with Austrian cavalry, a routine exercise meant to diffuse border tensions. Giovanni's horse unexpectedly stumbled mid-charge, pitching him directly into the path of an Austrian officer's training saber. The resulting 6-inch laceration across his left shoulder necessitated immediate hospitalization. During his mandatory recovery period, Giovanni utilized the forced idleness to synthesize the data from his factory tours. He grasped that industrial machinery fundamentally severed the traditional link between sheer human exertion and productive output. A solitary steam engine could now complete the labor of dozens of men. Novel manufacturing processes yielded goods with unprecedented speed, consistency, and cost-effectiveness compared to time-honored artisanal methods. Crucially, Giovanni concluded that the individual or group who commanded this burgeoning industrial technology would attain political and economic leverage far exceeding anything the traditional aristocracy had ever wielded. Upon concluding his military service in 1892, Giovanni confronted a juncture that would define his lineage's future. His father, Giuseppe Agnelli, expected him to oversee the family's respectable but modest agricultural investments and landholdings near Villa Perosa, a career path that offered predictable income and secure social standing. Giovanni rejected it utterly. Utilizing his military pay and a minor inheritance from his grandmother, he enrolled in engineering courses at Turin's Royal Technical Institute. His family was aghast. Engineering was generally viewed as a vocation fit only for middle-class mechanics, beneath someone of their aspirations. Social convention mattered little to Giovanni. His focus was absolute: master industrial machinery to unlock its potential for wealth accumulation and geopolitical power. His formal 2-year studies concentrated on production management, metallurgy, and mechanical design. Yet, his true schooling occurred in Turin's burgeoning industrial zone. In his off hours, he undertook an unpaid, unofficial apprenticeship with Carlo Racca, proprietor of a metalworking shop specializing in textile components. Giovanni learned the gritty details of maintenance, design, and manufacturing. He internalized cost accounting, mastered supply chain logistics, and navigated customer relations. Most pivotally, he developed a systematic framework for integrating independent firms into expansive industrial networks that controlled entire production life cycles, from raw material procurement to finished product delivery. By 1894, Giovanni had zeroed in on what he considered the single greatest opportunity in Italian commerce: automobile manufacturing. The technology was nascent, the market was chaotic, and nearly all existing producers were small-scale operations, lacking strategic business planning. Giovanni dedicated months to dissecting the emerging automotive firms across Europe, analyzing their financial blueprints, production methodologies, and market penetration strategies. He isolated their vulnerabilities and formulated a plan for a highly sophisticated organization capable of achieving sector dominance. In 1894, the industry was primarily characterized by specialized artisans crafting bespoke vehicles for the ultra-rich. Production was glacial, costs astronomical, and quality unreliable. Giovanni recognized that injecting mass production techniques into this framework would not only revolutionize the industry, but transform global transportation. However, realizing this vision demanded significant capital, specialized technical knowledge, and influential partners that he currently lacked. He needed visionary investors and technical architects. His vital breakthrough came through an unlikely association with Count Roberto Biscaretti di Ruffia, a Turin aristocrat captivated by automotive design. Biscaretti was actively innovating vehicle prototypes and seeking commercial partners. Giovanni and Biscaretti spent months crafting a plan for an automotive company that would integrate cutting-edge technical design with shrewd business management. Their vision was radical for Italy, a firm dedicated to the mass production of reliable, high-quality automobiles for the emergent middle class, rather than custom commissions for the aristocracy. The resulting business plan became the architectural blueprint for the eventual Fiat empire. It outlined raising significant capital through public stock offerings, recruiting Europe's most elite technical talent, and constructing facilities capable of manufacturing hundreds of vehicles annually. But the paramount detail was Giovanni's insistence on securing strategic decision-making control, even while bringing in outside financiers. He had closely analyzed industrial firms that were routinely subverted by banking interests, financiers who prioritized finance over manufacturing knowledge. Giovanni's ingenious solution was to structure the corporation to ensure that operational control resided permanently with the founders, granting financial investors handsome profits, but without meaningful voting power. This controlling structure would become the enduring mechanism by which the Agnelli family would govern their colossal industrial empire for the subsequent century. In early 1899, Giovanni and Biscaretti finalized their launch preparations. They secured facilities in Turin, recruited staff, and identified initial investors. They formalized the name Fabbrica Italiana Automobili Torino, or Fiat. On the 11th of July, 1899, 30 investors convened at the Turin office of Notary Alfredo Rice to sign the Articles of Incorporation for Fiat S.p.A. Giovanni Agnelli's personal capital contribution was minor, 400 lire, roughly $13,000 in today's currency. However, his real stake was not monetary. It was his proven ability to translate industrial control into enduring political and economic leverage. He had spent 5 years meticulously developing the strategies necessary to build and maintain control over vital infrastructure. He was now prepared to test those strategies on a scale that would forever define the future of European industry. In 1899, at the age of 33, Giovanni executed the decision that would irrevocably alter European industry. He channeled his limited savings into a fledgling enterprise named Fabbrica Italiana Automobili Torino. His initial financial commitment was modest 400 lire, roughly equivalent to $13,000 today. Yet within 20 years, he commanded an industrial monolith that generated annual wealth surpassing the budgets of many national governments. Giovanni's true genius transcended mere engineering or manufacturing. It was a profound comprehension of leverage. He codified a recursive formula for the family. Industrial dominance could be seamlessly converted into political influence, and that amplified political influence could then be weaponized to achieve even greater industrial expansion. This core insight became the Agnelli family's foundational, enduring secret weapon for the next 100 years. The inaugural Fiat factory opened in 1900 with just 35 employees, producing a mere 24 automobiles that first year. Production lagged, expenses exceeded projections, and technical failures were routine. Most contemporary observers dismissed the venture as a standard small-scale experiment destined for swift failure. Giovanni, however, perceived a different trajectory. He understood that automobiles were just the starting point. The true prize lay in building a fully integrated industrial network that would control every facet of transportation technology: engine, manufacture, steel production, tire supply, fuel distribution, and the associated financial services required for vehicle purchase. Within 3 years, Giovanni methodically attained majority control by acquiring shares from initial investors disheartened by the slow pace. By 1902, he was the company's managing director. By 1906, Fiat was manufacturing over 1,000 vehicles per year, dominating the Italian automotive sector. Giovanni's objectives stretched far beyond running a profitable car company. He was leveraging Fiat as the strategic anchor for constructing an industrial empire intended to influence Italian political and economic direction for generations. The former cavalry officer, once sidelined by a training injury, was on the cusp of becoming Italy's most formidable industrial figure. But to become Italy's most formidable figure, Giovanni realized that engineering genius wasn't enough. He needed to eliminate his rivals from within and secure a protector from above, and he was willing to break the law to do it. In 1908, just as Fiat was rising, it faced a reckoning that nearly destroyed it. A massive financial scandal rocked the Milan Stock Exchange. Rumors suddenly spread about falsified accounts and inflated share prices, causing Fiat's stock to crash spectacularly. But this was no accident. It was a calculated coup. Accusations emerged that Giovanni himself had orchestrated the panic to force the entire board of directors to resign. As the stock plummeted, Giovanni swooped in, buying up undervalued shares to consolidate absolute control. He was dragged to court, accused of manipulating stock prices for profit. The prosecutors failed to prove it, and Giovanni walked free due to insufficient evidence. But the message was clear. He didn't just want to lead the company, he wanted to own the game. Having conquered the boardroom, Giovanni turned his eyes to a far more dangerous arena: politics. In 1914, as the world stood on the brink of war, Giovanni found the ultimate political weapon in a rising radical journalist named Benito Mussolini. Subscribing to the ideology of, "You scratch my back, I'll scratch yours," Giovanni secretly financially backed Mussolini's newspaper and his political ambitions long before the March on Rome. It was a pact sealed in blood and oil. When Mussolini rose to power, he repaid the favor. He swept accusations of Fiat's war profiteering under the rug and awarded Giovanni lucrative military contracts. Trucks, tanks, machine guns. Fiat became the engine of the fascist war machine. By 1923, Mussolini appointed Giovanni as senator for life. The cavalry officer had become untouchable, building an empire on the back of a dictatorship. By 1905, Giovanni Agnelli had grasped the concept that would elevate him from a successful car manufacturer to the undisputed architect of Italian industrial power. The true secret was not superior car design, but absolute control over the entire ecosystem necessary for car production. While rivals obsessed over engine efficiency, Giovanni quietly amassed control over the firms supplying Fiat's raw materials, components, and distribution channels. He understood intrinsically that mastery over the supply chain equated to eventual mastery over the entire industry. His strategy was both brilliant in conception and ruthless in execution. Giovanni systematically identified Fiat's indispensable suppliers, steel producers, rubber manufacturers, and component specialists, and aggressively acquired controlling stakes. Sometimes these were amicable negotiations, with owners needing capital infusion. Often they were aggressive stock purchases, culminating in hostile takeovers. The steel sector became his first comprehensive target. Fiat consumed vast amounts of high-grade steel for chassis and engines. Rather than remaining reliant on external sources, Giovanni secured controlling interests in 3 Piedmontese steel companies. Between 1903 and 1,906. This decisive vertical integration offered immediate, profound competitive advantages. Fiat guaranteed its steel quality, dictated production schedules, and slashed costs by eliminating supplier profit margins. More ominously, Giovanni now controlled the critical steel supply relied upon by his competitors, allowing him to reserve the finest materials for Fiat, while forcing rivals to accept substandard quality or pay inflated prices. By 1906, this integration had transformed Fiat from a lone automotive company into the nucleus of a self-contained industrial nexus that controlled its own rubber components, steel production, and distribution. Competitors were rendered dependent on Agnelli-controlled suppliers, giving Giovanni unstated authority over the entirety of Italian auto manufacturing. But Giovanni's most enduring insight was how industrial consolidation could be converted into financial supremacy. As the integrated Fiat network increased in valuation, he leveraged its assets as collateral to acquire still more businesses. Each acquisition accelerated the financing of the next. In 1907, Giovanni formally established the Istituto Finanziario Industriale, IFI, a dedicated holding company created to manage and consolidate his proliferating industrial assets. IFI was the key to his long-term strategy. It allowed him to strategically coordinate his diverse portfolio, while maintaining separate public facades for each individual business. This holding company structure was critical for multi-generational empire building. Giovanni could internally shift profits to optimize tax liabilities, align cross-industry investment strategies, and ensure unchallengeable family control, even as companies like Fiat expanded enough to require external public investors. IFI became the crucial prototype for how the Agnelli family would guarantee command over their expanding empire for the next century. Operational entities could raise capital on public markets, but strategic control remained tightly concentrated within the private, family-controlled holding structure. However, Giovanni's industrial strategy was never purely focused on commercial expansion. He operated on the principle that economic might could be seamlessly monetized into political influence, which in turn generated exponentially greater economic opportunity. Beginning in 1908, Giovanni aggressively cultivated deep ties with Italian government officials responsible for military procurement, trade regulations, and national industrial policy. He supplied his technical expertise to government bodies, advised key politicians on economic strategy, and successfully enshrined Fiat as a cornerstone of Italian national security. His relationship with Prime Minister Giovanni Giolitti proved especially critical. Giolitti was spearheading Italy's drive toward industrial modernization and desperately required private sector allies capable of building the necessary manufacturing infrastructure. Giovanni strategically presented Fiat as the definitive answer to Italy's developmental needs. His proposition was a dual-purpose strategy: expand civilian automobile production while simultaneously developing manufacturing capacity that could be instantly repurposed for military production in the event of war. This made Fiat indispensable to both economic vitality and national defense. In exchange for state support, favorable regulations, and protectionist policies, Giovanni pledged that Fiat would perpetually maintain its headquarters and primary manufacturing operations within Italy, foregoing the temptation of cheaper foreign production. This guarantee provided the political class with the job creation and economic stability vital for their survival. The symbiotic alliance between the Italian state and Fiat became the enduring bedrock of the Agnelli family's political influence for the ensuing century. The government needed Fiat's employment figures and production output to guarantee economic stability. Fiat required government policies that protected its domestic market and secured global expansion opportunities. By 1910, this potent public-private arrangement had fundamentally reshaped both Fiat and the Italian economy. Fiat was the nation's largest auto producer, employing over 2,500 workers and manufacturing close to 3,000 vehicles annually. Its integrated web controlled everything from engine components and rubber to financial services. But the quantitative data merely hint at the truth. Giovanni had achieved an unparalleled feat in Italian business, rendering his private enterprise indispensable to national economic policy while ensuring total family control over all strategic directives. When Rome required technical expertise on industrial development, Giovanni was consulted. When foreign capital sought entry into Italian markets, they negotiated with the Fiat network. When other Italian companies needed access to advanced manufacturing technology, they negotiated with Giovanni's network. This nexus of control within Italy's industrial ecology opened doors to wealth accumulation that far eclipsed mere profits from car sales. Giovanni gained the covert ability to influence the allocation of government contracts, the regulation of emerging technologies, and the provision of favorable regulatory treatment across various sectors. The integrated strategy was delivering sensational financial results. Between 1905 and 1910, Giovanni's personal net worth ballooned by over 200%. IFI's portfolio value grew even faster, estimated at 15 million lire by 1910, approximately $200 million in modern terms. But Giovanni grasped that perpetuating this empire demanded radical adaptability in the face of uncontrollable political and economic forces. European states were increasing their industrial intervention. Competition from surging American and German manufacturers was intensifying. Labor unions were organizing and demanding better conditions. Most critically, military tensions were hardening across the continent as the alliance structures that would precipitate World War I solidified. Giovanni realized that any future conflict would present existential challenges to international industrial companies. His master solution was to cement Fiat's status as essential infrastructure for Italian national security, while simultaneously ensuring the operational agility necessary to pivot between dramatically different political climates. He aggressively diversified the product line to include naval components, military vehicles, and aircraft engines. He forged international partnerships to guarantee access to foreign markets and technology irrespective of governmental geopolitical conflicts. Most significantly, Giovanni commenced the calculated effort of cultivating relationships with political figures spanning the entire European ideological spectrum. He befriended liberal. The Agnelli network was broad, encompassing pro-market Democrats, socialist advocates for worker rights, and conservative nationalists focused on military prowess. This ideological versatility proved to be the family's most formidable asset during the profoundly turbulent decades that lay ahead. Where other industrial magnates crumbled under political shifts they failed to foresee or adapt to, the Agnellis endured and prospered, navigating fascism, world wars, periods of revolution, and the eventual transition to democratization. By 1914, Giovanni had transformed a simple car company into the backbone of Italian industry. However, the ultimate crucible for his empire-building strategy was approaching fast with the eruption of World War I. The conflict presented a binary outcome: the complete destruction of his lifelong project, or the pivotal opportunity to permanently cement Agnelli dominance over European industry for the foreseeable future. The year 1922 presented Giovanni Agnelli with perhaps the most consequential and dangerous decision of his career. Benito Mussolini had recently executed the March on Rome with 25,000 blackshirts, successfully demanding that King Victor Emmanuel III install him as Italy's prime minister. While most established Italian business leaders were gripped by terror, fearing that the fascist movement's radical political agenda would lead to nationalization, revolution, or widespread economic destabilization, Giovanni viewed the upheaval through a different lens. He saw a golden, ruthless opportunity: the chance to transition Fiat from merely the nation's largest automobile manufacturer into the fundamental industrial engine for a nascent European power structure. The choice Giovanni made in the weeks immediately following Mussolini's ascent guaranteed Agnelli industrial supremacy for the century that followed, yet simultaneously embedded a history of profound moral compromises that continue to shadow the family legacy today. Agnelli's alignment with fascism was not sudden. Its roots extended several years prior to Mussolini's takeover. Since 1919, Italy had suffered convulsive socialist uprisings, paralyzing labor strikes, and severe economic instability that posed an existential threat to private industrial ownership. Communist workers had repeatedly occupied factories, shutting down production across northern Italy, and revolutionary violence directly targeted government officials and business leaders. Fiat, in particular, bore the brunt of this unrest. Communist organizers led strikes that halted automobile production for extended periods, and worker councils even attempted to seize control of facilities to impose socialist production models. Agnelli himself was personally threatened by revolutionary activists, necessitating the hiring of private security and constant variation in his daily routines. Giovanni quickly concluded that Italy's established political framework was fundamentally incapable of controlling the revolutionary tide, threatening to eradicate private enterprise. The liberal democratic structures were too infirm to maintain order. Conservative politicians lacked necessary popular backing, and socialist leaders were either unwilling or unable to rein in their more radicalized followers. Thus, when Mussolini emerged, promising to restore total order while preserving the essential principles of private ownership, Agnelli recognized a potential, albeit dangerous, cure for the crisis threatening the core of Italian capitalism. However, Agnelli's backing of fascism transcended mere apprehension regarding socialist revolution. He astutely recognized that if managed correctly, fascist ideology could unlock avenues for extraordinary industrial expansion through guaranteed government protection and massive subsidies. Fascist economic doctrine prioritized autarky, or national self-sufficiency, achieved primarily through accelerated domestic industrial development. This translated directly into colossal state investment in manufacturing infrastructure, robust protectionist tariffs against foreign competition, and mandated coordination between private corporations and state planners. For an industrial behemoth like Fiat, fascist economics effectively promised secure, guaranteed domestic markets, heavily subsidized expansion projects, and unassailable political shielding from both international rivals and internal opposition. Giovanni strategically began cultivating these relationships with key fascist leaders well before the March on Rome even took place. He funneled crucial financial support to fascist publications, sponsored social events for fascist intellectuals, and made Fiat facilities available for political rallies. Most pivotally, he established a careful personal friendship with Mussolini himself. The partnership between Giovanni and Mussolini was intricate and meticulously calibrated by both parties. Mussolini desperately required major industrial backing to successfully translate his political dominance into tangible economic development, thereby justifying the regime to the Italian populace. Conversely, Giovanni needed political guarantees to expand Fiat's colossal operations without being hampered by socialist interference or international competition. Their initial major collaborative effort centered on Fiat's aggressive expansion into aircraft manufacturing. Determined to rapidly build Italian military aviation capabilities capable of rivaling other European powers, Mussolini accepted Giovanni's offer to repurpose Fiat's automotive manufacturing expertise toward advanced aircraft engine production, thereby providing the technological cornerstone for Italian air strength. The aircraft partnership yielded immense advantages for both men. Mussolini gained access to cutting-edge manufacturing technology and could claim credit for vital industrial achievements, while Giovanni received guaranteed government contracts, effective protection from labor unrest, and access to military technologies adaptable for future civilian automobile production. Yet the collaboration swiftly deepened beyond military procurement. Agnelli and Mussolini crafted a comprehensive master plan to align Italian industrial growth directly with fascist political objectives. Fiat was positioned as the regime's flagship enterprise, intended to demonstrate how private enterprise could thrive under fascist guidance while simultaneously boosting national power and prestige. Under this privileged arrangement, Fiat enjoyed unparalleled state support. Protective tariffs effectively eradicated foreign automobile competition in Italian markets. Government agencies became Fiat's largest clients, purchasing vast fleets for both civilian and military purposes. State investment banks offered highly favorable financing for expansion. The tangible results were nothing short of spectacular. Between 1922 and 1929, Fiat's automobile output soared by more than 400%. Employment rose from 12,000 to over 35,000, and corporate revenues expanded at a pace unmatched by any other major European car manufacturer. However, this indispensable government support was tightly conditional, eventually compromising the Agnelli family's independence and moral standing. Mussolini fully expected Fiat to champion fascist political objectives, even when those goals contradicted sensible business strategy. Beginning in 1925, Fiat's production soared by 400%, but that profit was paid for in silence. The Golden Agreement with Mussolini was fundamentally a bargain over human dignity. While Giovanni solidified his political power in Rome, independent worker voices were violently extinguished on the factory floor. The fascist state turned Fiat's facilities into showcases. Not showcases of efficiency, but of absolute control, where the cost of a lucrative government contract was the systematic dismantling of worker rights. The Agnelli family got the contracts. The workers got the black shirts. Government envoys regularly conducted tours for foreign delegations, presenting Fiat facilities as undeniable proof of Italian industrial achievement under Mussolini's leadership. Worker rallies at the plants were meticulously orchestrated to demonstrate overwhelming support for the regime and its economic agenda. Giovanni himself was deeply integrated into the state's structure, appointed to various government committees coordinating industrial policy. He served on the influential Council of Corporations, designed to merge private companies into cohesive state economic planning, and participated in trade missions promoting Italian industrial exports to other fascist-aligned governments. Most controversially, Giovanni provided substantial personal financial support for fascist political activities and widespread propaganda efforts. He subsidized publications that promoted authoritarian industrial development, financed youth organizations tasked with indoctrinating young Italians with fascist ideology, and backed political candidates championing the regime's economic platforms. By 1930, the strategic, two-decade-long collaboration between Fiat and the fascist government had elevated Giovanni Agnelli to the status of one of Italy's most formidable individuals. His industrial conglomerate accounted for approximately 12% of all Italian manufacturing output, and his political leverage profoundly shaped policies affecting millions of Italian workers. His personal fortune had swollen to a level rivaling Europe's ancient aristocracy. Despite this success, Giovanni possessed a clear understanding that his partnership with fascism was fundamentally volatile. The ideology demanded ever-increasing political encroachment upon private enterprise. Mussolini's volatile international ambitions were generating disastrous military commitments, and the authoritarian political structure was creating internal dissent that posed an eventual threat to both fascist rule and the businesses that sustained it. Giovanni's solution was brilliant and cold-blooded. Maintain overt superficial loyalty to fascist ideology while discreetly preparing for seismic political shifts that would demand entirely different strategies. He continued his public collaboration with Mussolini's administration while simultaneously diversifying his investments privately, cultivating vital international business relationships, and strategically positioning Fiat to survive any eventual regime collapse. This delicate strategy demanded extraordinary political dexterity and an unparalleled degree of moral flexibility. Giovanni had to simultaneously meet fascist demands for ideological compliance while ensuring operational efficiency for the business. He had to retain Mussolini's complete trust while avoiding commitments that might annihilate Fiat if the regime failed. The collaboration brought Fiat unprecedented wealth and industrial dominance, but it bound the family, their fortune, and their morality to a regime of violence. They had secured the empire, but they had sacrificed the nation's political soul. The great question was no longer if Fiat would profit from war, but how much blood would be on the balance sheet. By 1935, these inherent contradictions had become impossible to reconcile. Mussolini's invasion of Ethiopia explicitly confirmed the regime's commitment to imperial expansion, ensuring Fiat's potential involvement in military conflicts far beyond Italy's borders. Furthermore, fascist racial laws began systematically targeting Italian Jewish citizens, including some of Fiat's employees and business associates. Increased coordination with Nazi Germany began to associate Italian fascism with far more extreme ideological stances. Giovanni's response to this escalating crisis demonstrated the depth of moral compromise required by industrial collaboration with authoritarianism. He continued funding Mussolini's government while meticulously attempting to minimize Fiat's entanglement in the regime's most objectionable policies. He preserved business relationships with Jewish partners while scrupulously avoiding public dissent against anti-Semitic legislation. He accelerated military production while endeavoring to limit Fiat's direct role in combat operations. By 1940, however, these delicate compromises proved wholly inadequate. Mussolini's catastrophic decision to enter World War I as an ally of Nazi Germany forced Fiat into direct complicity in military aggression, an outcome Giovanni had desperately sought to avoid. The long collaboration between Giovanni, Agnelli, and Italian fascism had cemented Fiat's industrial dominance and accumulated unprecedented family wealth. Yet, it had also bound the company to dangerous political and military ventures that threatened to obliterate everything the Agnellis had constructed should fascist ideology lead Italy to military defeat and political collapse. The final, definitive test of Giovanni's complex empire-building strategy was about to commence with the outbreak of World War II. When Mussolini declared war on Britain and France on the 10th of June 1940, Giovanni Agnelli faced the bitter realization that his decades-long collaboration with fascism had culminated in a catastrophic error. His carefully constructed industrial empire was now being inexorably dragged into a military conflict that could ensure its total ruin. Within weeks of Italy's entry, Fiat's facilities pivoted entirely, converting civilian automobile lines into military manufacturing. The company quickly became one of the nation's foremost producers of aircraft engines, military transport vehicles, artillery components, and submarine parts. Nearly 80% of Fiat's total capacity was now dedicated to sustaining Mussolini's war machine. Crucially, Giovanni grasped a reality that Mussolini stubbornly refused to accept. Italy simply lacked the necessary industrial base, natural resources, and military technology to compete against the combined might of Britain, the Soviet Union, and the United States. The war, he knew, was unwinnable. Giovanni's strategy was pure, cold-blooded calculus. It was not a choice between right and wrong, but a desperate, expensive hedging of bets. He had to ensure the fascists saw absolute loyalty on the surface, keeping the Fiat war machine running. But simultaneously, he had to secure insurance against inevitable defeat, a secret moral alibi for the post-war trials. The immediate challenge was managing Fiat's vast workforce, which exceeded 55,000 employees by 1941, making it one of Europe's largest industrial employers. Maintaining peak production meant preventing labor unrest, sabotage, or mass walkouts that could cripple manufacturing vital to the war effort. Giovanni's solution was highly pragmatic. He ensured Fiat workers received significantly superior wages, working conditions, and job security compared to their counterparts at other Italian companies. Even amidst severe wartime shortages and government wage freezes, Fiat employees benefited from supplementary food rations, housing assistance, and medical benefits, making employment at the company a prized commodity. But the strategy extended far beyond simple material incentives. Giovanni correctly assessed that the political loyalty of his workforce was fleeting and would collapse the moment Italy's military position deteriorated. To guarantee Fiat's continuity, regardless of the war's ultimate victor, he needed direct relationships with both ardent fascist loyalists and crucial underground opposition groups. Working through reliable intermediaries, Giovanni initiated providing discreet support to anti-fascist resistance organizations operating throughout northern Italy. This aid manifested in various forms, allowing resistance members to hold jobs within Fiat facilities, granting access to vital communications equipment and transportation, and sharing critical intelligence concerning German military movements within Italy's industrial zones. Giovanni's covert funding of the resistance was the dynasty's greatest gamble. It was an act of survival, not altruism. Every secret meeting, every piece of shared intelligence, every act of sabotage he approved was a meticulously placed marker, proof he could show the Allies later. The goal was not to save Italy, but to ensure that the resistance leaders who became the next government would forever be indebted to the Agnelli name. Navigating these dual relationships between official fascist power and the clandestine resistance required a constant, perilous balancing act. Giovanni was obligated to sustain military production to satisfy Mussolini's war machine, while simultaneously covertly supporting activities designed to undermine fascist control. The period following September 1943 was the most perilous, occurring after the Italian government's surrender to the Allies and the subsequent German occupation of northern Italy. Fiat's facilities became critical strategic assets for German defense planning, rendering the company a primary target for Allied bombing raids while subjecting it to direct, harsh German command. German occupation authorities demanded maximum military output, installing their own managers in key positions and requiring exhaustive reports on production, worker productivity, and security. Any hint of resistance or sabotage promised factory closures, mass arrests, or swift executions. Giovanni's response crystallized the survival skills that would define the Agnelli family strategy for decades. He offered just enough cooperation to stave off German reprisals, while simultaneously engineering opportunities for resistance work that would solidify Fiat's post-war standing. Collaborating closely with his resistance network, Giovanni organized systematic sabotage, designed to diminish military output without leaving undeniable evidence of deliberate destruction. Manufacturing equipment would suffer convenient maintenance issues. Essential raw materials would be misdirected where they could not be effectively utilized, and quality control mysteriously failed to identify defective products until they were already delivered to German military units. This sabotage campaign was incredibly risky. Discovery would have instantly resulted in Giovanni's execution and the total dismantling of Fiat. Yet, the strategy provided crucial advantages for post-war survival. Significantly reduced military production lessened Fiat's culpability in supporting the German war machine, potentially minimizing future war crimes charges. Furthermore, verifiable resistance activity could serve as powerful evidence of anti-fascist loyalty during Allied occupation. Most crucially, the sabotage network established deep personal relationships with resistance leaders who were destined to become critical political figures in post-war Italy. These very relationships proved indispensable when Allied authorities arrived to investigate Fiat's wartime collaboration and considered whether to confiscate the company's assets or prosecute its senior management. The liberation of northern Italy in April 1945 immediately presented challenges that could have utterly destroyed the Fiat Corporation. Allied authorities were mandated to identify, arrest, and prosecute Italian industrialists who had collaborated with the fascist and German forces, leading to the confiscation of many companies and the trial of numerous business leaders. Giovanni's highly nuanced survival strategy was immediately deployed. Resistance leaders who had participated in Fiat's underground network provided testimony confirming Giovanni's covert support for anti-fascist activities. Allied intelligence officers, having been briefed by their resistance contacts, corroborated that Fiat had provided practical assistance toward Allied military objectives. Yet, Giovanni's single most important asset was his relationship with Vittorio Valletta, Fiat's operational manager, who had maintained the company during the war. While Giovanni focused on the political tightrope walk, Valletta offered impeccable technical credentials and a noticeable lack of clear fascist political affiliations, making him the perfect figurehead during the impending Allied investigations. In June 1945, Allied authorities officially removed Giovanni from Fiat's leadership and installed Valletta as the interim manager pending a full investigation into the company's wartime conduct. This maneuver allowed Giovanni to avoid direct personal accountability for collaboration, while maintaining essential family influence over corporate strategy through Valletta's management. The subsequent investigation spanned nearly 2 years, involving exhaustive scrutiny of production records, financial transactions, and employee testimony. Investigators indeed found evidence of deep collaboration with fascist and German authorities, but they also uncovered compelling documentation of resistance, support, and sabotage activities, a duality that fundamentally complicated any simplistic judgment regarding the company's loyalties. Ultimately, Allied leadership concluded that Fiat's survival and continued functionality were far more critical to Italy's post-war economic recovery than the pursuit of wartime retribution. The company employed tens of thousands, controlled vital manufacturing infrastructure, and possessed indispensable technological capabilities required for national reconstruction. In 1947, Giovanni was officially exonerated of war crimes charges and permitted to reclaim control of Fiat. The company emerged from World War I with its industrial capacity undamaged, its workforce expanded, and its political relationships significantly strengthened by successfully navigating the treacherous transition from fascist collaboration to democratic legitimacy. The wartime experience had, however, instilled in Giovanni crucial, guiding principles regarding power, survival, and moral expediency that would shape the Agnelli family strategy for future generations. Industrial success, he learned, required seamless adaptation to any political environment, while maintaining absolute operational control over essential infrastructure. Survival through political transitions mandated cultivating relationships across opposing factions, while strictly avoiding ideological commitments that could become liabilities. Most importantly, Giovanni had realized that being indispensable was profoundly more powerful than being morally righteous. Fiat's continuity depended not on political consistency or moral purity, but on ensuring the company was so essential to Italy's economic operation that its destruction would inflict unacceptable damage upon the nation's social and financial stability. This lesson, the ultimate survival skill, would guide the Agnellis through the Cold War. Periods of acute Italian instability, internal terrorist campaigns, and massive economic transformations. They had made themselves too important to fail. But while the grandfather built the empire in the shadows of war, the grandson would rule it in the flashing lights of the paparazzi. Enter Gianni Agnelli, the man who didn't just run Italian industry, he became its rock star. Gianni Agnelli was the undisputed king of sprezzatura, the art of making the difficult look effortless. He was the man who routinely leapt from his helicopter directly into the Mediterranean Sea, swam ashore at the world's most exclusive hotels, and casually joined Jackie Kennedy for lunch. He wore his watch over his shirt cuff because he was too busy to pull back his sleeve, a quirk that men all over Italy copied. He drove a modest Fiat to work, but secretly had a Ferrari engine installed under the hood. He was a symbol of pure adrenaline, linked to beauties like Rita Hayworth and Anita Ekberg. To the public, he was the Golden Prince, but in private, he was hiding a secret that could have derailed the dynasty. Between 1948 and 1953, Gianni engaged in a clandestine, intense romance with Pamela Harriman, the former daughter-in-law of Winston Churchill. She was a woman of immense charm and political connection, but she was not the suitable wife for the heir to the Fiat throne. They lived a life of stolen weekends on the French Riviera and secret apartments in Paris. But the Agnellis were Italian royalty, and duty always came before love. The family demanded a marriage that cemented their status, not a romance that made headlines. Gianni knew he had to choose between his heart and his crown. The party came to a violent halt on an August night in 1952. Driving his Ferrari at breakneck speeds along the French Riviera, Gianni crashed into a truck. The accident was catastrophic. His leg was shattered in multiple places, nearly killing him. Ironically, it was his secret lover, Pamela Harriman, who rushed to his side, nursing him through the grueling recovery and saving his leg from amputation. But the brush with death changed him. He realized the playboy lifestyle had limits. In a heartbreaking twist of duty, Gianni ended the affair with Pamela to marry the noblewoman Marella Caracciolo, a union that merged industrial might with aristocratic blue blood. The playboy limp he carried for the rest of his life wasn't just an injury. It was the scar of his transformation from a reckless heir into the serious industrialist who would lead Italy into the modern age. In 1950, Gianni Agnelli stood on the terrace of his grandfather's Turin mansion, surveying the vast Fiat factories that sprawled across the Mirafiori district like a dedicated mechanical city. At the age of 29, he was poised to inherit control of an industrial empire that had miraculously survived fascism and global war, but now faced a new set of challenges that could either destroy the company or transform it into the cornerstone of unparalleled European prosperity. Gianni grasped a fundamental truth that would ultimately establish him as the wealthiest man in modern Italian history. The post-war economic boom offered the single greatest opportunity for wealth accumulation in European history. Crucially, capitalizing on this opportunity required a strategic vision that looked far beyond conventional manufacturing. It demanded the systematic control of essential economic infrastructure. Italy's subsequent economic miracle, 1,951,970, witnessed an average annual GDP growth rate of 6%, a pace exceeded only by West Germany in Europe. However, Gianni quickly realized that mere participation in this national growth was insufficient for building lasting dynastic power. The Agnellis required a strategy that placed them squarely at the nexus of Italy's economic transformation, diversifying decisively beyond automobile production into critical sectors that would exert structural control over Italian capitalism for generations. The refined strategy Gianni implemented successfully made the Agnelli family indispensable to the functioning of the Italian economy, while generating fortunes that dwarfed the treasuries of smaller nations. Gianni's foundational insight was recognizing that post-war automobile demand would fundamentally differ from the pre-war era. The future lay not in luxury vehicles for the elite, but in reliably mass-produced, affordable cars tailored for the burgeoning middle-class families entering the consumer economy for the first time. Achieving the necessary massive production volumes, however, required manufacturing capacity that Fiat did not yet possess in 1950. The wartime reconstruction of factories had focused on military needs, necessitating complete retooling for efficient civilian output. Furthermore, achieving mass-market scale demanded capital investment far exceeding Fiat's immediate reserves. Gianni's ingenious solution was to heavily leverage Marshall Plan reconstruction funding, while simultaneously expanding Fiat's operations into sectors poised to benefit from European economic integration. Between 1950 and 1,955. Fiat secured over $40 million in U.S. reconstruction aid, which was immediately used to erect the most advanced automobile manufacturing complex in all of Europe. The new Mirafiori plant, inaugurated in 1952, was an industrial engineering marvel, capable of manufacturing 600,000 vehicles annually, a capacity exceeding the entire operations of most competing European automakers. Adopting sophisticated assembly line techniques pioneered by American manufacturers, Fiat achieved production efficiencies that made their cars highly competitive internationally, while generating significant profit margins. But the definitive breakthrough was the launch of the Fiat 600 inches 1,955, priced affordably for the Italian middle class at roughly 590,000 lire, or about $950 USD. The 600 was also engineered with enough sophistication to compete effectively against French and German imports. Within 3 years, Fiat was moving over 400,000 units annually, securing an overwhelming 85% control of the domestic Italian automobile market. The spectacular success of the Fiat 600 created massive cash flows, enabling Gianni to launch the aggressive diversification strategy that would redefine the Agnellis' role, transitioning them from mere car manufacturers to outright controllers of Italian capitalism. Between 1,955 and 1,960, Fiat strategically reinvested automotive profits to acquire controlling stakes in key enterprises across numerous sectors: steel manufacturing, heavy construction, industrial machinery, telecommunications, aviation, and, crucially, financial services. Every acquisition was precisely calculated to both fortify Fiat's core competitive advantage and establish reliable new revenue streams, independent of fluctuations in auto sales. Steel companies supplied essential raw materials directly to Fiat, while also selling products to the infrastructure construction firms rebuilding the nation. Telecommunications investments strategically positioned Fiat to profit from the complex communication networks that underpinned European economic integration. But Gianni's most ingenious strategic innovation was his profound understanding of how financial services could dramatically amplify industrial control. In 1958, he founded Sava Società per Azioni Vendite Automobilistica, a financing company designed to provide installment loans for Fiat vehicle purchases. Sava allowed middle-class customers to buy Fiat cars through manageable monthly payments instead of prohibitive cash transactions, thus dramatically broadening the potential market. The financing arm provided multiple layers of competitive advantage. Customers who financed through Sava were inherently more loyal to Fiat products. Loan servicing created continuous customer relationships, exploitable for additional sales. And, most significantly, the operation generated profits simultaneously from the sales of automobiles and the provision of financial services. By 1960, Fiat no longer simply controlled automobile manufacturing. It commanded significant portions of the supply chain that furnished raw materials, financed purchases, and provided infrastructural support for Italy's entire automotive sector. This deeply integrated structure meant that competitive threats to Fiat's core car business could often be mitigated and managed through the broader industrial network rather than through direct manufacturing competition alone. The financial returns were staggering. Between 1,955 and 1,965, the Agnelli family's estimated wealth surged by more than 300%. Fiat employed over 100,000 individuals and effectively controlled approximately 4.4% of Italy's total GDP. Gianni had ascended not merely to Italy's wealthiest individual, but to one of the most structurally powerful economic actors in post-war Europe. Yet, he recognized that preserving this dominance necessitated sophisticated political relationships capable of protecting Fiat's market position while enabling essential international expansion. Italy's 1957 entry into the European Economic Community presented both immense opportunities and grave threats. Determining whether Fiat could successfully compete against giants from Germany, France, and Britain, Gianni's strategic response was twofold. Publicly position Fiat as indispensable infrastructure for Italian engagement within European integration, while privately cultivating personal relationships with political leaders across diverse countries and ideological spectrums. He skillfully fostered ties with Christian Democrat politicians who dominated Italian governmental policy, social democratic leaders who guided European integration strategies, and conservative politicians who influenced international trade regulations. This elaborate political network served several crucial ends. Fiat consistently benefited from favorable terms in government procurement contracts, regulatory policies that insulated its domestic market share, and diplomatic support for its aggressive international expansion campaigns. More valuable still, these relationships provided Gianni with advanced, nuanced information regarding political developments that profoundly shaped business operations and investment decisions. Gianni's political sophistication was rigorously tested during the turbulent 1960 seconds, a decade marked by significant social and economic upheaval in Italy. Widespread student protests, crippling labor strikes, and the emergence of political terrorism threatened the very stability that had enabled the country's economic boom since the 1950 seconds. Many contemporary business leaders feared that this political instability might cascade into outright socialist policies, potentially leading to the nationalization of major private companies or the imposition of crippling regulations. Confiscatory tax rates demonstrated his profound understanding of economic leverage in shaping political realities. Rather than merely resisting political shifts, he skillfully positioned Fiat as the indispensable solution to Italy's economic dilemmas. This involved endorsing moderate reforms designed to appease political factions without compromising the integrity of private enterprise. When confronted by union demands for improved wages and working conditions, Agnelli negotiated sophisticated agreements that granted benefits to workers while meticulously preserving productive efficiency. Similarly, when student demonstrators decried capitalism, he proactively funded educational programs. These initiatives not only highlighted Italy's impressive industrial achievements, but also addressed genuine concerns regarding economic inequality. Most critically, when political extremists attempted to deploy terrorism against Italian business leaders, Gianni cooperated closely with security services, powerfully demonstrating that Fiat's continuous success was the essential guarantor of Italian economic stability and social advancement. This strategic approach proved phenomenally successful. While political polarization roiled other major European nations and hampered their economic expansion, Italy managed to maintain the political equilibrium required for sustained growth. Fiat's vast employment figures, substantial wage disbursements, and critical tax contributions became compelling evidence supporting policies that championed private enterprise and robust international integration. By 1970, Gianni had completed the transformation of Fiat from a mere regional car manufacturer into the veritable foundation of Italy's engagement in the global economy. The company now controlled diverse industrial sectors, employed hundreds of thousands, and generated revenues influential enough to steer Italian government fiscal policies. But perhaps more significantly, Gianni had perfected the blueprint that would secure the Agnelli family's dominance over Italian economic development for the subsequent half-century. They had successfully rendered themselves indispensable to Italian prosperity, while cultivating political relationships that transcended specific governments or ideological movements. The post-war economic miracle had provided the platform for the permanent Agnelli dominance over European industry. Yet, sustaining this preeminence would demand continuous adaptation to emerging challenges. Intensified international competition, rapid technological shifts, and complex political developments that would rigorously test whether the strategies effective in post-war Italy could endure within an increasingly intricate global economy. In 1976, Gianni Agnelli made a decision that sent shockwaves through the entire European automotive sector. He announced that Fiat would become the first major Western corporation to construct a complete automobile manufacturing plant inside the Soviet Union, a move designed to produce vehicles for the communist bloc market, while allowing Fiat to retain strict capitalist control over the most advanced automotive technology available in Eastern Europe. The Soviet deal represented an unparalleled development in the history of Cold War business relations. At a time when Western governments and communist authorities regarded each other with intense suspicion and overt hostility, Gianni recognized a unique opportunity to extract profit from both sides of the ideological chasm, thereby positioning Fiat as a critical intermediary between rival economic systems. This strategy was poised to transform Fiat from a successful European firm into a true global industrial empire, operating across every continent, yet maintaining family control over strategic decisions impacting millions of workers and consumers worldwide. Agnelli's decision to penetrate the Soviet market was rooted in his detailed analysis of global automotive trends throughout the early 1970s. American and Japanese manufacturers were rapidly expanding their international footprints via standardized production methodologies and aggressive global marketing campaigns. European firms that remained exclusively focused on their domestic markets were destined to be overwhelmed by competitors boasting superior production volumes and significantly lower per-unit costs. However, Gianni realized that simple international expansion was insufficient for long-term survival against the American and Japanese giants. Fiat needed to cultivate competitive advantages that were impossible for larger rivals to replicate, advantages derived from accessing exclusive markets and technologies beyond the reach of other companies. The Soviet Union presented precisely this type of opportunity. Communist economic planners desperately required Western automotive technology to modernize their transportation infrastructure. Yet, deep ideological barriers prevented most Western corporations from establishing substantial operations behind the Iron Curtain. Fiat's willingness to operate within the specific constraints of the communist economic structure offered unparalleled access to a market encompassing 280 million consumers, simultaneously excluding all other Western competitors. Negotiating the Soviet agreement demanded navigating the most formidable business and political hurdles any Western company had faced during the Cold War. Soviet authorities insisted upon significant technology transfers that would foster independent production capabilities, while Italian and American governments vehemently demanded that strategic technologies not be shared with potential military adversaries. Gianni's resolution demonstrated the maturity and sophistication of the political network he had painstakingly cultivated over 2 decades of managing Fiat's relationship with successive Italian governments. He successfully enlisted the leaders of the Italian Communist Party to provide crucial credibility with Soviet negotiators, while simultaneously reassuring NATO allies that the agreement would not jeopardize Western security interests. The key insight was meticulously structuring the Soviet operation to grant necessary technology access without transferring strategic capabilities that could be exploited for military purposes. Fiat would license standard production methods and provide extensive technical training, but maintain absolute control over advanced engine designs and sophisticated electronic systems which held potential military applications. After 3 years of intensive negotiation, the historic agreement was formalized in 1976. Fiat committed to constructing a comprehensive automotive manufacturing complex in the Soviet city of Togliatti, producing vehicles based on Fiat designs for distribution throughout the communist bloc. The massive facility would employ 60,000 Soviet workers and was projected to manufacture 660,000 vehicles annually, a volume larger than the entire operations of many Western automobile companies. The financial arrangements were extraordinary. The Soviet government agreed to pay Fiat $3.2 billion over a decade for technology licenses, equipment, and technical services. Fiat was also slated to receive substantial additional revenues from ongoing royalty payments and component sales. Total projected income surpassed $8 billion, exceeding double Fiat's annual revenues, derived from all its other global operations combined. But the Soviet deal was merely one component of Gianni's sweeping global expansion strategy throughout the 1970s. While simultaneously establishing communist bloc operations, he was setting up Fiat manufacturing facilities in Brazil, Argentina, Turkey, Spain, and Yugoslavia. Every new operation was deliberately designed both to serve its regional market and to contribute strategically to Fiat's overarching global production network. The Brazilian operation, established in 1976, perfectly illustrated Fiat's ability to adapt to specific local market conditions, while rigorously maintaining central strategic control. Brazil's military government desired domestic automotive manufacturing that would generate employment and reduce the nation's reliance on imported vehicles. Fiat responded by proposing to build cars specifically engineered for Brazilian road conditions and consumer preferences, all while integrating global production standards. The adapted vehicles achieved enormous success across Latin American markets. By 1980, Fiat's Brazilian division was producing over 300,000 vehicles per year and had captured 25% of the Latin American automobile market. More importantly, the Brazilian facility served as a foundational manufacturing hub for expansion into other, smaller Latin American countries unable to support independent operations. Similar localized strategies were deployed across several continents. Spanish operations were primarily geared toward the major European export markets. Turkish facilities were established to serve Middle Eastern customers. Partnerships in Yugoslavia provided essential access to non-aligned nations that maintained diplomatic ties with both Western and communist governments. By 1985, Fiat was managing manufacturing plants in 12 nations and distributing vehicles in over 60 national markets. Total global employment surpassed 350,000 workers worldwide. Annual revenues had soared to over $25 billion, cementing Fiat's status as one of the largest industrial enterprises worldwide. But this intense global expansion created profound management challenges that demanded organizational innovations far exceeding traditional corporate structures. Coordinating production, technology development, and marketing across numerous countries, each with distinct legal frameworks, currencies, and political environments, necessitated entirely new approaches to corporate governance and strategic planning. Gianni's solution was to reconfigure the entire Agnelli industrial empire around the holding company structure that Giovanni had pioneered in the 1922, but thoroughly modernized for global operations. Exor, formerly IFI, became the central coordination mechanism for all Agnelli investments. Operational companies in various nations retained local management autonomy but reported to a centralized strategic planning core. The holding company structure offered critical advantages for global operations. Profits could be efficiently optimized across multiple international tax jurisdictions. Currency risks were deftly managed through international financial markets. Political risks in any single nation were mitigated through diversified operations that avoided dependency on one government or market. Most importantly, the structure ensured that the Agnelli family maintained unwavering control over all major strategic decisions, while still enabling professional management of complex international operations. Local managers were granted operational autonomy to adapt to regional conditions, but critical decisions involving major investments, technology sharing, and expansion remained concentrated in Turin under Gianni's direct personal supervision. The global expansion strategy yielded spectacular financial returns. Between 1900 1,970 and 1,985. The Agnelli family's accumulated wealth grew by more than 800%. Fiat controlled approximately 12% of global automobile production outside the United States and Japan. The company's burgeoning international operations consistently generated higher profit margins than its traditional European manufacturing base, while simultaneously providing access to the faster-growing markets within developing nations. But Gianni recognized that achieving global industrial dominance required far more than manufacturing plants. Controlling international markets meant actively influencing the political and economic policies that governed market access, trade regulations, and technology standards across numerous countries. His solution was to forge powerful political relationships with government leaders worldwide, establishing Fiat as essential infrastructure for economic development in any country seeking industrial modernization. This commitment went beyond mere automobile assembly. It involved offering comprehensive industrial development programs that encompassed extensive worker training, systematic technology transfer, and robust local supplier development. This political influence strategy proved most effective in developing countries where Fiat's operations quickly became pivotal factors in national economic performance. In Brazil, Fiat's massive employment figures and tax payments heavily influenced governmental industrial policy. In Turkey, Fiat's technology transfers underpinned broader national manufacturing development. Across Eastern Europe, Fiat operations provided communist governments with crucial access to Western technology, which they used to justify initial economic reforms. By 1985, Fiat had emerged as one of the most politically influential industrial corporations globally. Government leaders routinely consulted Gianni regarding international economic policies. Fiat's expansion decisions frequently shaped diplomatic relationships between sovereign states. The company's technology standards affected the trajectory of the entire global automotive industry. But perhaps the greatest achievement was Gianni's demonstration that Italian industrial companies could successfully compete against American and Japanese multinational corporations while preserving European family control over strategic direction. The global expansion proved that superior management sophistication and expertly cultivated political relationships could overcome scale disadvantages against much larger competitors. This success solidified the foundation for the Agnelli family's decades-long dominance over European industry. Nevertheless, retaining global leadership would demand further adaptation to new realities. Technological transformation, stringent environmental regulations, and political shifts that would test the viability of Cold War strategies in an increasingly interconnected and fiercely competitive global economy. On March 16, 1978, Gianni Agnelli received a phone call that would fundamentally alter the operating dynamics of the Italian government. Aldo Moro, Italy's revered former prime minister and most respected political figure, had been brutally kidnapped by the Red Brigade terrorist organization while en route to Parliament for a critical vote concerning communist participation in the national government. The kidnappers' demands were simple yet politically impossible. Release imprisoned Red Brigade members, or Moro would be executed. The Italian government maintained its rigid refusal to negotiate with terrorists, yet political leaders across the spectrum privately reached out to Gianni for immediate guidance on managing a crisis that had the potential to define Italy's political future for decades. What transpired during the 55 days of Moro's captivity revealed the extraordinary political leverage Gianni had amassed through 3 decades of strategic relationship building, economic power projection, and meticulous self-positioning as the indispensable mediator among Italy's fiercely competing political factions. Agnelli's rise as Italy's unofficial political kingmaker had begun amid the severe social upheavals of the late 1960s and early 1970s. Student protests, massive labor strikes, and mounting terrorist violence had collectively created a profound crisis of governance, threatening to dismantle the stability crucial for continued economic prosperity. Traditional political leaders were paralyzed by ideological chasms that prevented any effective response to the rapidly escalating social conflict. The political landscape was extraordinarily fragmented. Christian democratic governments formally controlled the state apparatus, but lacked the popular support required to implement necessary economic reforms. Communist and socialist parties commanded significant popular loyalty, but were excluded from participating in government due to intense Cold War pressures. Meanwhile, extremist groups on both the left and right utilized violence in concerted efforts to undermine democratic institutions entirely. Gianni recognized that business leaders who confined themselves to simply opposing political change would inevitably be overwhelmed by forces they could not govern. His alternative strategy was to proactively position Fiat and the Agnelli family as essential mediators, capable of bridging ideological divides while simultaneously safeguarding the economic foundations necessary for all political factions to pursue their respective objectives. This strategy demanded cultivating relationships across the entire political spectrum, maintaining credibility with each faction as a reliable partner in advancing their interests. This translated into supporting core Christian democratic economic policies while engaging constructive dialogue with communist leaders on issues concerning worker welfare. It meant providing security assistance to counter terrorism, while maintaining open lines of communication with moderate left-wing politicians who voiced legitimate grievances about economic inequality. Gianni's political network by the mid-1970s was unprecedented in the history of Italian business. He fostered personal friendships with government ministers, opposition party leaders, powerful trade union officials, influential newspaper editors, and even foreign ambassadors who played key roles in shaping Italian policy decisions. These relationships were never based on simple financial contributions. They were built upon arrangements of mutual benefit that made Gianni invaluable to political leaders, irrespective of their ideological allegiances. For Christian democratic politicians, Gianni offered critical economic expertise and international business connections, essential for managing Italy's pivotal role in European integration and global markets. His endorsement of moderate economic policies helped justify centrist positions against both communist criticism and conservative resistance. For communist and socialist leaders, Gianni offered pragmatic engagement with capitalist economic structures that could deliver tangible improvements in worker welfare and living standards without necessitating a revolutionary transformation. Fiat's comparatively generous labor policies and stable employment levels served as proof that private enterprise could indeed support progressive social objectives. For trade union officials, Gianni provided a capable negotiating partner who understood that lasting labor stability required addressing worker concerns regarding wages, working conditions, and job security. Fiat's collective bargaining agreements frequently became industry-wide models that successfully balanced worker benefits with demanding requirements for productive efficiency. These diverse relationships afforded Gianni influence over government decision-making that often surpassed the power possessed by elected officials. When political leaders required counsel on economic policy, they consulted Gianni before making public commitments. When international negotiations necessitated an understanding of business implications, Gianni participated as an unofficial government representative. When social conflicts threatened national economic stability, political factions uniformly turned to Gianni for crucial mediation assistance. The Moro kidnapping crisis demonstrated precisely how this political influence operated during national emergencies. While government officials became entangled in debates over constitutional principles and security protocols, political leaders privately sought Gianni's assessment of how different responses might impact Italy's delicate economic and social stability. Gianni's counsel during the crisis reflected his core belief that preserving democratic institutions required preventing both terrorist success and a governmental overreaction that might justify authoritarian measures. He endorsed the government's refusal to negotiate with the terrorists, while simultaneously advocating for policies that would address the underlying social grievances fueling terrorist recruitment. More controversially, Gianni utilized his extensive international business connections to explore whether foreign governments or intelligence agencies could assist in locating Moro without officially involving Italian authorities in potentially sovereignty-compromising activities or democratic norms violations. The tragic conclusion of Moro's kidnapping, his execution after 55 days in captivity, demonstrated the limitations even of Gianni's extraordinary political influence. But the crisis also revealed the extent to which Italian political leadership had grown reliant on Agnelli's guidance during periods of national emergency. Following Moro's death, Italian politics underwent a fundamental realignment that further solidified Gianni's influence. The Christian Democratic Party, traumatized by the loss of its most respected figure, became increasingly reliant on business support to maintain electoral viability. Communist and socialist parties, seeking to demonstrate democratic legitimacy, grew more willing to compromise with capitalist economic structures. Gianni skillfully capitalized on this political realignment by promoting what he termed productive collaboration between democratic political forces and private enterprise. The concept involved government policies actively supporting business growth while simultaneously ensuring that the resulting economic benefits were distributed widely enough to sustain social stability and political legitimacy. This collaboration model profoundly shaped Italian policy development throughout the 1980 seconds. Government industrial policies consistently favored major corporations like Fiat, which guaranteed substantial employment and contributed heavily to export earnings. Labor regulations were carefully crafted to balance worker protections with necessary business flexibility requirements. Tax policies incentivized private investment while funding robust social programs designed to address persistent concerns about inequality. But Gianni's political influence extended well beyond domestic Italian politics into the spheres of European and international affairs. As Fiat's global operations mushroomed, he became an essential voice in high-level discussions regarding European economic integration, international trade policies, and diplomatic relations between Western and communist nations. His dual persona as a wildly successful capitalist entrepreneur and a political mediator capable of working with communist governments made Gianni invaluable to Western leaders striving to comprehend Soviet intentions during the final phases of the Cold War. He provided key insights into communist economic planning that influenced NATO policy discussions concerning technology transfer and trade relationships. Similarly, his strong relationships with Western political and business figures made Gianni highly useful to communist governments seeking access to advanced technology and international markets without compromising their core ideological principles. He effectively served as an unofficial diplomatic channel for communications that could not be routed through formal government channels. By 1985, Gianni had achieved a level of political influence unprecedented for a business leader operating in any democratic nation. He was consulted by multiple governments on international policy decisions, participated in diplomatic meetings that shaped East-West relations, and acted as a trusted advisor to political leaders spanning the ideological spectrum. This formidable political network provided immense benefits for Fiat's business operations. Government policies consistently favored the company's expansion plans. Regulatory decisions invariably accounted for Fiat's competitive needs. International trade negotiations factored in the company's market access requirements. But perhaps most significantly, Gianni had demonstrated that sophisticated political engagement could furnish business leaders with influence over governmental decision-making that was far more effective than traditional lobbying or simple campaign contributions. By successfully making himself indispensable to political leaders across competing factions, he had engineered a form of private power that operated in parallel to democratic institutions. The model would subsequently be adopted by business leaders worldwide over the following decades. However, Gianni had been the first to perfect the strategy of converting concentrated economic influence into profound political power, while meticulously maintaining democratic legitimacy and avoiding overt conflicts with constitutional governance. The success guaranteed the Agnelli family's permanent participation in Italian political leadership, regardless of which parties held power or what ideological movements gained popular support. They had successfully made themselves too critical to Italian political stability to ever be excluded from decision-making processes that affected their interests. This brings us to the most brutal lesson the Agnellis offer. Ideologies die, regimes fall, but business is eternal. Consider the timeline. Giovanni funded fascists to get military contracts. Gianni partnered with Soviets during the height of the Cold War to build factories. And today, John Elkann preaches green energy and EVs, not because of moral environmentalism, but because that is where the market's survival lies. While others fought for beliefs, the Agnellis fought for market share. They didn't care if the hand shaking theirs wore a fascist black shirt, held a communist hammer and sickle, or signed a climate treaty as long as it signed the contract. They teach us that in the game of dynasties, having principles is a luxury, but having interests is a necessity. But behind the glamour of the Riviera and the roar of the Ferrari engines, a dark cloud was gathering over Turin. Gianni Agnelli conquered the business world, but he could not conquer fate. For every billion the family made, it seemed the Agnelli curses demanded a blood sacrifice. It is a grotesque irony. The family that built its fortune, selling vehicles to the world, would be repeatedly destroyed by them. The first strike came in 1935. Gianni's father, Edoardo, was the heir apparent. But while landing a seaplane near Genoa, a freak accident occurred. The plane's propeller struck him, violently decapitating him instantly. Gianni was just 14. But death wasn't finished. Just 10 years later, in 1945, Gianni's mother, Virginia, a half-American aristocrat famous for keeping a leopard on a leash, was killed when her car collided head-on with a U.S. Army truck. In a single decade, 3 generations of leadership were wiped out, leaving Gianni alone at the top. Decades later, the curse returned for the next generation. Gianni had chosen his nephew, Giovannino Agnelli, to be the future of Fiat. He was everything the family hoped for: industrious, modest, and brilliant. But in 1997, at the age of just 33, Giovannino was struck down by a rare and aggressive form of intestinal cancer. His death plunged Italy into nationwide mourning, comparable to the loss of a royal prince. The carefully groomed successor was gone, leaving a void that could not be filled. And then, the most heartbreaking chapter of all, Gianni's only son, Edoardo. Unlike his father, Edoardo was a sensitive soul who struggled to find his place in the ruthless world of business. He battled addiction and a fractious relationship with his demanding father. On a cold morning in November 2000, Edoardo drove his car to a bridge locally known as the Bridge of Suicides. He stopped the car and jumped 60 meters to his death. Some say it was a final, desperate attempt to prove his courage to a father he could never please. Gianni Agnelli, the man who had survived wars, recessions, and terrorists, was broken. He died 3 years later, leaving the crown not to a son, but to his young grandson, John Elkann. In January 2003, as Gianni Agnelli lay dying within his Turin mansion, he finalized a decision that would largely determine the trajectory of European industry for the next century. Instead of fragmenting the vast Agnelli empire among multiple heirs or selling it off to external international investors, he chose to concentrate control in the hands of his 7-year-old grandson, John Elkann. Elkann had never managed a major corporation, Yet he possessed something Gianni deemed more valuable than simple operational experience: the acute intelligence and strategic ruthlessness necessary to adapt the family's concentrated power to the complexities of a rapidly globalizing world. The choice of successor sparked immediate controversy, even within the Agnelli family. Gianni's daughter, Margherita, expected to inherit significant control over the sprawling business empire her father had painstakingly built over 5 decades. Other family members questioned whether a man so young could effectively navigate the intricate political and economic challenges confronting Fiat in an increasingly aggressive global marketplace. But Gianni grasped a fundamental truth about dynastic power that his critics overlooked. Maintaining family control over essential industrial infrastructure necessitated leaders who could look past traditional business models toward achieving systematic control over the emerging digital economy. John Elkann was an unconventional choice for dynastic leadership. Born in New York to an American mother and raised across various countries, he seemed more a cosmopolitan intellectual than a traditional Italian industrialist. He was fluent in multiple languages, held degrees from prestigious European universities, and possessed interests in technology and media that surpassed his immediate knowledge of automotive manufacturing. Yet, these apparent disadvantages were precisely why Gianni selected him as heir. The rapidly globalizing economy demanded leaders who could effortlessly navigate multiple cultures, diverse regulatory systems, and shifting technological environments. Traditional Italian business methods were wholly inadequate for competing against aggressive American technology firms, burgeoning Chinese manufacturers, and dominant German industrial conglomerates. Elkann's international background provided capabilities that would be critical for preserving Agnelli influence during the next phase of European economic development. His American citizenship facilitated business relationships difficult for purely European companies to cultivate. His deep technological interests positioned him to understand how digital innovation would radically transform automotive manufacturing. His youth meant he could adapt dynamically to changes that would utterly overwhelm leaders committed to antiquated approaches. Gianni believed he had secured the dynasty by choosing John, but he was wrong. The moment the patriarch was buried, the family didn't just grieve, they went to war. And the biggest threat to John's new empire wouldn't come from competitors, but from his own blood. When the dust settled after Gianni's funeral, 3 grandchildren emerged. But their paths could not have been more different. John Elkann was the chosen one, serious, buttoned up, and nicknamed the accountant for his lack of flash. But then there was his brother, Lapo Elkann, flamboyant, chaotic, and the wild heart of the family. While John was in boardrooms saving the company, Lapo was providing tabloid fodder. In 2005, the family faced a PR nightmare when Lapo was found unresponsive in a Turin apartment due to a drug overdose involving cocaine and heroin. The scandal was so severe that newspapers reported priests being summoned to his hospital bedside. Lapo survived and later reinvented himself as a fashion entrepreneur, but the incident made one thing clear: the crown could only sit on John's head. Lapo was out. But dealing with a wild brother was easy compared to the ultimate betrayal. In 2007, John's own mother, Margherita Agnelli, launched a legal nuclear bomb against her son and the family advisors. The conflict? Money. Lots of it. Margherita claimed that a massive part of her father's estate, worth an estimated $5 billion, had been hidden from her in offshore accounts, secret trusts, and shell companies from Liechtenstein to the Virgin Islands. She wasn't just suing for cash, she was suing for control. She claimed she had been tricked into signing away her rights, effectively removing her and her 5 children from her second marriage from the dynasty's future. This is a lawsuit that pits mother against son, exposing the family's secret wealth, including a priceless art collection of Picassos and Monets, to the public eye. While John runs Stellantis, he is simultaneously fighting a court battle that accuses the family of tax evasion and fraud. The Kennedys of Italy are currently starring in the world's most expensive family feud, This decision revealed the Agnellis' ultimate defense against the succession trap. History is littered with dynasties like the Vanderbilts or the original Rockefellers that crumbled because they diluted their insane power, splitting the fortune among dozens of squabbling heirs. Gianni Agnelli avoided this by following a ruthless rule: one king, one crown. He deliberately bypassed his own daughter, Margherita, and his other grandchildren to concentrate total control in the hands of one person, John Elkann. Through the family holding company, Exor, he ensured that while other family members might receive dividends to live like royalty, only John held the voting rights to rule the empire. It was a brutal calculation. To survive, a dynasty needs a monarch, not a committee. But while the family was fighting over the gold of the past, John knew the empire was crumbling in the present. He didn't have time to argue in court. He had a dying company to save. The transition commenced in 2003 as Gianni's health deteriorated and John rapidly assumed increasing responsibility for strategic decisions affecting Fiat's future. The company was facing its most acute crisis since World War I. Global competition had severely eroded Fiat's market share across European automobile markets. Financial losses were escalating to levels that threatened imminent bankruptcy. Labor costs in Italian manufacturing had become entirely uncompetitive compared to facilities operating in Eastern Europe and Asia. Most importantly, the automotive industry was poised on the brink of a technological revolution that would require colossal investments in electric vehicles, autonomous driving systems, and advanced digital manufacturing processes. Any company that failed to adapt to these sweeping changes risked being eliminated by competitors possessing superior technology and more streamlined production methods. But John had one advantage that his competitors didn't. It is what political scientists call structural power. You see, influence isn't just about calling a politician for a favor. Real power is when the politician needs you to survive. Consider this. When the Agnellis make a decision about car production, entire regions gain or lose thousands of jobs. Politicians need their factories to remain in Italy to keep voters happy. Suppliers need their contracts to stay in business. The government needs their tax revenue to fund the budget. This created a form of private governance that operates parallel to democratic institutions. The Agnellis made themselves indispensable. So essential that removing them would cause a national economic collapse. While other families built wealth, the Agnellis built the machinery of the state itself, and as John Elkann proved, whoever controls the machine makes the rules. John's response to these immense challenges demonstrated the forward-thinking strategic vision that would define his leadership for decades. Instead of merely attempting to preserve Fiat's traditional market position through incremental improvements, he devised plans for fundamental transformation that would reposition the Agnelli empire at the very nexus of automotive industry evolution. The first crucial element of John's strategy was aggressive international consolidation. Fiat's survival depended on achieving the necessary scale to compete effectively with truly global automotive companies that boasted far larger production volumes and exponentially greater financial resources. This imperative meant either acquiring or merging with other corporations to forge an integrated manufacturing network capable of efficiently servicing multiple regional markets. The opportunity materialized in 2009 when the Chrysler Corporation faced bankruptcy amidst the global financial crisis. While other potential acquirers focused solely on Chrysler's daunting financial problems and severe operational difficulties, John recognized an undervalued company possessing valuable brand recognition, existing advanced technology capabilities, and, most critically, guaranteed access to the essential American market. The Chrysler acquisition demanded navigating complex negotiations involving the Obama administration, which oversaw the company's bankruptcy proceedings, as well as European Union regulators concerned about industrial concentration within the automotive sector. John's international background and political sophistication were indispensable for managing these conflicting requirements. The final deal structure underscored John's mastery of leveraging government support to achieve private business objectives. Instead of merely purchasing Chrysler through traditional financial markets, Fiat secured management control in exchange for technology sharing and operational improvements that guaranteed the preservation of American jobs while granting Fiat vital access to North American markets. The arrangement satisfied multiple political objectives while simultaneously creating enormous value for the Agnelli family. American officials could rightfully claim credit for saving an iconic American company and securing manufacturing employment. Italian politicians could celebrate Fiat's successful role in international business expansion. Crucially, Fiat gained control over manufacturing facilities, technology assets, and market access valued in the billions of dollars. By 2014, the Chrysler integration had effectively transformed Fiat from a struggling European firm into a powerhouse global automotive corporation operating across multiple continents. Combined production volume now exceeded 4.8 million. By 2014, the integration of Chrysler transformed Fiat from a struggling European firm into a bona fide global automotive corporation operating across multiple continents. Combined production volume surpassed 4.8 million vehicles annually. Revenues reached $132 billion. Employment totaled over 230,000 workers worldwide. But John understood that traditional automotive manufacturing was merely one element of a broader industrial blueprint. His ultimate goal was strategic control over the critical infrastructure that would underpin the next century of global economic expansion. The real opportunity lay in positioning the Agnelli empire via Exor at the critical nexus, where established manufacturing prowess met the revolutionary force of digital technologies. To achieve this, he strategically diversified Exor's portfolio, moving aggressively beyond car production into converging sectors. These sectors included media companies, tasked with shaping public perception of profound industrial shifts, financial services designed to inject vital capital into technological development, and luxury goods firms catering to the burgeoning global wealthy class emerging from this economic transformation. His media investments began with bolstering control over established Italian newspapers and magazines, but rapidly extended to international publications that wielded significant influence over governmental policy and corporate strategy. The 2015 acquisition of a substantial stake in The Economist was particularly telling, providing the family access to global policy dialogues and decisively proving the reach of Agnelli influence far beyond Italian borders. Financial services were honed toward infrastructure financing, technology development funds, and international investment management. These strategic positions served a dual purpose. They provided invaluable early intelligence on nascent business opportunities, while simultaneously generating substantial profits by facilitating the wider economic transformation driven by other enterprises. Perhaps most importantly, John cultivated deep relationships with the titans of the emerging digital economy, the architects of the platforms destined to dictate 21st-century economic dominance. These connections offered unparalleled foresight into technological trends that would reshape automotive manufacturing and fostered unique collaboration pathways between legacy industrial entities and disruptive digital forces. The diversification strategy delivered phenomenal results. Between 2010 and 2020, the value of Exor's portfolio soared by more than 180%, elevating the Agnelli family's estimated wealth above $15 billion. More significantly, the family had successfully positioned itself to capitalize on multiple vectors of technological and economic change, removing its dependency on the volatile success of the automotive industry alone. John Elkann's paramount achievement, however, was demonstrating that established European industrial dynasties could successfully compete with capital-intensive American tech giants and state-backed Chinese enterprises, while rigorously preserving family control over strategic direction. This triumph affirmed that superior management acumen and sophisticated international networking could effectively offset scale disadvantages when competing against much larger rivals. This strategy established a vital template for how traditional industrial families could successfully navigate globalization and technological upheaval while meticulously safeguarding dynastic power. Rather than merely preserving inherited assets, John had masterfully shown how familial control could be leveraged as a dynamic tool to seize opportunities born from economic upheaval. By 2020, the Agnelli Dynasty had successfully executed the pivot from traditional manufacturing dominance to global industrial leadership, while maintaining the dynastic control established by Giovanni in 1899. They had proven that their power could survive and flourish amid technological revolutions, fierce international competition, and political turbulence. But maintaining this hard-won success demanded confronting new challenges that would determine if the strategies perfected during the 20th century could endure within an increasingly digital and environmentally sensitive global economy. In March 2021, addressing a global assembly of the world's most influential automotive executives, John Elkann delivered an announcement that sent shockwaves through the entire sector. Stellantis, the newly formed entity resulting from the merger of Fiat, Chrysler, and the French automaker PSA, would commit an astounding $35 billion to electric vehicle development over the subsequent 4 years. This figure surpassed the entire market valuation of Tesla just 5 years prior. Yet, the massive EV investment was merely the most visible component of a far more profound strategic objective. John was skillfully positioning the Agnelli empire to dominate the digital infrastructure essential for survival in the transformation from legacy automotive manufacturing to the mobility-as-a-service platforms set fundamentally redefine global transportation. The declaration represented the most radical strategic departure in Agnelli family history since Giovanni's pivotal decision to enter automobile manufacturing in 1899. John was staking the family's 125-year industrial legacy on his conviction that digital technology would enable unprecedented wealth concentration for companies capable of seamlessly integrating traditional industrial manufacturing with nascent platform technologies. The strategy demanded a deep understanding of how technological convergence was forging new economic power structures that seamlessly bridged traditional industry lines. Automotive production was rapidly evolving into just one element of complex, integrated mobility systems. These systems encompassed autonomous driving software, extensive EV charging networks, shared transportation platforms, and sophisticated data analytics services designed to optimize traffic flow and vehicle utilization. Companies that successfully controlled multiple layers of these integrated systems would be positioned to extract profits from nearly every facet of transportation, while rivals focused solely on isolated components would inevitably face marginalization. John realized that Stellantis had to transition from being merely an automotive manufacturer to becoming a comprehensive mobility platform company. The initial EV investment was specifically designed to ensure Stellantis remained one of the few global players capable of producing electric vehicles at the colossal scale required to serve worldwide markets. By 2024, Stellantis aimed to introduce electric versions of all major vehicle models, while concurrently developing proprietary battery technology to secure competitive advantages over firms reliant on external suppliers. But John understood that achieving high-volume EV production was merely the entry fee for future mobility markets. The genuine opportunity, the ultimate prize, was gaining command over the digital platforms that would knit vehicles, infrastructure, and users together into optimized transportation networks, maximizing both efficiency and transaction profit extraction. His solution involved positioning Stellantis as the essential bridge connecting traditional automotive manufacturing expertise with the emerging technology companies developing autonomous driving systems, electric charging networks, and mobility service platforms. Rather than engaging in direct, costly competition with pure technology firms, Stellantis would supply the foundational manufacturing infrastructure that would empower digital platforms to deliver services directly to consumers. The strategy commenced with significant capital deployment into autonomous driving technology. Stellantis forged partnerships with AI-focused tech firms specializing in vehicle navigation, safety monitoring, and traffic optimization. These collaborations provided crucial access to advanced systems, while simultaneously preserving Stellantis's control over the core elements of vehicle manufacturing and crucial customer relationships. These autonomous driving investments were exceptionally expensive, but unequivocally vital for securing future competitiveness. Fully autonomous vehicles were projected to dramatically reduce the need for individual car ownership among many consumers, thereby creating immense opportunities for profitable shared transportation services derived from vehicle utilization rather than initial sales. Companies possessing command over both vehicle manufacturing and the autonomous driving technology stack would be uniquely positioned to offer seamlessly integrated transportation services that rivals could not emulate. They could instantly optimize vehicle design for shared use, automatically coordinate complex maintenance and charging schedules, and extract maximum profit from both the manufacturing process and the resulting service provision. But John's most ambitious digital initiative involved constructing a fully integrated ecosystem of mobility services, designed to generate high-margin recurring revenue from ongoing transportation activities, shifting the profit model away from single vehicle sales. This ecosystem was planned to encompass comprehensive EV charging networks, shared transportation platforms, predictive vehicle maintenance services, and insurance products tailored specifically for electric and autonomous vehicles. The investment in the charging network alone demanded an outlay of over $8 billion for infrastructure development across Europe and North America. Crucially, control over these charging networks granted Stellantis ongoing relationships with EV owners and created strategic opportunities to cross-sell additional services, including vehicle maintenance, insurance offerings, and premium transportation upgrades. The shared transportation platform was engineered to allow Stellantis vehicles to generate profit across their entire operational lifespan, rather than solely during the initial sale transaction. Vehicles optimized for shared use could operate for 10 to 12 hours daily, instead of sitting unused 95% of the time, like privately owned vehicles. This dramatically improved utilization efficiency was projected to generate multiple, diversified revenue streams from the identical manufacturing and capital investment. Perhaps most critically, the integrated ecosystem was designed to produce vast amounts of actionable data on mobility trends, user behavior, and infrastructure performance, which could be monetized through sophisticated analytic services. These services were offered to key stakeholders, including municipal governments, urban planners, and corporations, focused on optimizing complex transportation systems. The data strategy intentionally mirrored the model of successful technology firms that had established lucrative platform businesses by providing services designed primarily to capture valuable insights into user behavior. Stellantis's role was therefore dual: to operate the mobility services, thereby building comprehensive databases of transportation needs, and simultaneously developing the advanced analytics capabilities to package and sell this intelligence as distinct business services. By 2023, the ambitious digital transformation strategy yielded results far surpassing initial projections. Stellantis had successfully climbed to become the world's third-largest automaker by revenue, all while cultivating advanced technology capabilities that positioned it uniquely to contend with both established legacy manufacturers and disruptive emerging mobility platforms. Furthermore, key investments in electric vehicles, EVs, allowed Stellantis to secure a substantial market share, within the industry's most rapidly expanding segment. In critical European markets, for example, EV sales were surging by 40% year over year, contrasting sharply with the stagnation of traditional vehicle sales. This clear disparity confirmed that companies making proactive and early investments in EV technology were cementing crucial competitive advantages, barriers that slower-moving rivals would find exceedingly difficult, if not impossible, to dismantle. From a cavalry officer in 1899 to a digital tycoon in 2024, the Agnellis have done what no other dynasty could: survive. They survived wars that destroyed nations. They survived scandals that would have buried lesser families. And they survived their own tragedies. Today, looking at the gleaming towers of Stellantis, one has to wonder, is the Agnelli curse finally broken? Or is it simply waiting for the next generation? Because, as history shows, in the Game of Thrones of the Agnelli family, power never comes for free. It is always paid for, in blood. Ultimately, the Agnelli story asks us a difficult question. Would you trade your peace of mind, your privacy, and potentially the safety of your children for absolute power? John Elkann has the crown. But looking at his family's history, is it a prize or a prison? Let me know in the comments below. Genius visionaries or ruthless opportunists? I'll be reading your thoughts. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the real godfathers of Italy, like and subscribe.